My family laughed when I attended my father's funeral, then the lawyer read the will, and they couldn't laugh anymore. I received the envelope on a Wednesday afternoon, wedged between grocery flyers and overdue bills. No return address, just my name, Monica, written in rigid, familiar handwriting across the front. I almost tossed it. Junk, probably. But something, instinct maybe, made me pause. My hands shook slightly as I opened it, steeling myself for something. I didn't know what. But I wasn't expecting this. A funeral notice. My father had died. I stared at the crisp card in silence, waiting for emotion, grief, maybe shock, or even anger. But nothing came. Just a quiet numbness settling over everything. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. We're excited to connect with all of you, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more amazing content. Now back to the story. It had been 10 years since I'd heard anything from the Turner family. A full decade since I left behind the judgment, the rejection, and the pointed silence. I'd walked away from that life and never looked back. The day I left, Lucas was barely more than a toddler, strapped into his car seat while I drove with a swollen lip and a duffel bag stuffed with baby clothes. I'd finally escaped the man who broke more than bones. I went to my father, desperate and shaking, hoping for shelter. All he gave me was shame. "You made your choice," he said. That was it. End of conversation. But I didn't crumble. I started over. Lucas and I built a quiet life in Augusta. Nothing fancy, but it was safe. I worked at the public library shelving books, read him bedtime stories, made peace with the quiet. And every month, despite the silence, I mailed money to my father through his neighbor, Mr. Halverson. No explanations, no thanks. Just quiet support. Lucas never knew. I never told anyone. And now, here I was, holding a funeral invitation and shaking hands, wondering why a man who never once reached out had suddenly summoned me back. "Are you going to go?" Lucas asked quietly, stepping up beside me, eyes scanning my face. I couldn't answer. The lump in my throat had taken over. He added, softer still, "Maybe he left you more than just a will, Mom. Maybe there's something else." I looked at him, my reason for everything, and I felt something shift. I didn't know what awaited me back in Charleston. But if there was anything left unsaid, I needed to hear it. So I packed our bags and prepared to return to a place I swore I'd never see again. The chapel looked smaller than I remembered. The dark wood beams, the stained glass windows blurred beneath the gloomy sky. It should have felt holy, but it didn't. The air inside was thick, heavy, like perfume clinging to old resentment. Lucas gripped my hand tightly as we stepped inside. Heads turned before we'd even made it halfway down the aisle. Whispers ignited like sparks. Some people looked shocked, others just stared, like they were seeing a ghost. And then I saw them. Vanessa and Paul, my sister and brother, stood near the front, dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion catalog, their grief curated, not worn. Vanessa's eyes locked on mine. Her lips curled into something sharp. Well, she said, just loud enough for those around to hear. "Looks like the outcast thinks there's still money to be had." Paul chuckled quietly, but his eyes didn't smile, they just judged. Same as always. I didn't answer them. I kept walking, eyes ahead, spine stiff, even though everything inside me screamed to turn around and leave. I found a seat in the back, last pew, far corner, as far from Vanessa and Paul as I could get. I hadn't come here for them. I wasn't looking for drama or recognition. I came to say goodbye. Lucas slid in beside me, his small hand gripping mine even tighter. I felt the tremble in his fingers. I leaned down and whispered, "It's okay, baby, we're just here to sit." But it wasn't okay. Not really. Up front, the pastor cleared his throat. The service began. Prayers, polite eulogies, and brittle words that felt as hollow as the man they were about. Not once was my name mentioned, not even a nod to my existence. They skipped over entire chapters of his life. Skimmed from his childhood to Vanessa's devotion and Paul's rare, heroic business trips home to help. It was a fiction. Clean, glossy, and entirely missing me. Lucas rested his head on my shoulder, still and quiet. I stared forward, but I could feel the stares, hear the quiet snickers hidden behind tissues. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because all my tears had been spent years ago. When the service ended, people began filing out like nothing had happened. Most passed without even a glance. One cousin gave me a stiff nod and looked away. Vanessa swept past like I was invisible. Paul followed and paused just long enough to lean in and say, "Didn't think you had the nerve to show up." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Neither did I." He smirked. "Don't get comfortable. This isn't your story anymore." Then he walked off, and I sat frozen, hand still wrapped around Lucas's, his head leaning against me like we were the last two real things in a room full of cardboard cutouts. They didn't realize I wasn't there to be part of their story. I came to end mine. The Turner family home hadn't changed. Same red brick, same white pillars, same ivy wrapping around the porch, like it was trying to strangle something underneath. Walking through that front door after a decade felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Chilled, airless, untouched. Guests filled the space. Old neighbors, distant relatives, a few business acquaintances. I recognized most of their faces, though none would meet my eyes. Conversations dropped into murmurs as soon as I entered. Vanessa stood near the fireplace with a glass of white wine, swishing it around like she was at a gallery opening. Paul leaned beside her, red wine in hand, smirking like he owned the room. They didn't look like they were grieving their father. They looked like they were waiting for applause. When they noticed me enter with Lucas, Paul leaned in and said, loud enough for half the room, "This won't take long. She was cut out years ago." A few guests gave uneasy chuckles. Some looked away like they'd just remembered a very important appointment on the far side of the room. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I kept my coat on, even with the fire burning. Lucas stayed close, his fingers still wrapped in mine, watching the room the way only kids who've lived through storms know how to watch, with quiet alertness, reading every twitch and hush. We found 2 chairs in the back of the parlor, tucked away from the fire and the wine. I scanned the walls. Framed photos still hung where I remembered them. Vanessa at her graduation, Paul on some boat trip, family vacations to coastal resorts. Not one single photo of me, not even from when we were kids. I wasn't surprised. I'd been erased, efficiently and with intention. Vanessa caught my eye and offered a smile, not warm, but claiming. Possessive, like I'd wandered into her kingdom without an invitation. "You can sit here if you want, Monica," she said, voice like sugar-coated venom. "Just don't expect a chapter." I gave her nothing, not even a blink. Lucas looked up at me then, eyes sharp. Not scared, not puzzled, focused. As if he was waiting, sure that something important hadn't happened yet. And I believed him. The room fell into an uneasy silence when the front door opened again. In stepped Harold Denton, my father's attorney. Gray suit, polished shoes, same leather briefcase I remembered from years ago. Only this time, he carried something else too. A small cedar box tucked under one arm. Vanessa barely acknowledged him. Paul checked his watch like he had somewhere better to be. "Thank you all for being here," Mr. Denton said, his voice smooth but commanding. "Per Mr. Turner's instructions, we'll begin with a video message before reading the will." You could feel the air tighten. "A video?" Vanessa said, already annoyed. "Can't we just skip ahead? We all know what it says." Paul nodded. "Let's not drag it out. Some of us have flights." But Mr. Denton didn't flinch. He calmly walked to the fireplace and set the cedar box on the coffee table. Then he placed the briefcase beside it and began to undo the latches. "It was your father's specific request," he said. "This must be seen before any legal matters are addressed." Vanessa rolled her eyes. Paul muttered something low and bitter. A few guests leaned forward, curiosity outweighing boredom. I said nothing. But Lucas, he sat upright, his posture changing, his hand relaxing slightly in mine. I glanced down at him. His face was open, soft, lit with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. He didn't say a word, but it was there, pouring out of him, like he'd always known this moment was coming. And suddenly, I didn't feel alone anymore. The screen blinked once, then again before steadying into focus. A low hum filled the room, and then, there he was. My father. Older than the version frozen in my memory. His body had withered some, his shoulders slouched under invisible weight. His eyes, once sharp, cold, looked different now. Dull at the edges, heavy with time. He sat at his old oak desk, the one we were never allowed to touch growing up. The same painting of the marshlands still hung on the wall behind him. He looked directly at the camera. "If Monica is watching this," he said, voice raspy and worn, "then I owe you the apology I never had the courage to give." The room went still. I was wrong, he continued. I judged you for walking away from something I didn't understand. I thought you were selfish, weak. I didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to hear, so I let myself believe what was easier. He paused, his hands twitching nervously in his lap, something I'd never seen him do. That night you showed up, bruised and trembling, your baby in your arms. I should have opened the door. I should have said, "You're safe here." But I didn't. I let my pride speak louder than love. My throat tightened. Lucas's hand found mine again. I never looked away from the screen. I told myself I was teaching you a lesson, that I was helping you stand on your own, but the truth is, I was punishing you. For surviving, for choosing yourself, for showing strength I didn't understand. Behind me, someone shifted in their seat. A cough, an exhale, but I didn't move. I learned the truth, Monica, he said. A few years ago, Halverson came by with an envelope. No note, just money to cover a bill. I recognized the handwriting instantly. He leaned a little closer to the camera. You sent money. Every month. Quietly. No recognition. No calls. Just care. Even after I turned my back on you, you made sure I had what I needed. My eyes burned, tears hot but silent. You never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father. I could feel Lucas watching me, but I couldn't break my focus. I watched a man who had once been unmovable begin to unravel, piece by piece. Halverson kept me updated, said you were working at the library, that Lucas was smart, kind, that he looked at the world with your eyes, patient and curious. He smiled, soft and worn. It cracked something in me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, but if I can leave you with one truth, it's this: you were right. You walked away from pain, you protected your son, and you built something better. His voice shook. I don't want to be remembered as the man who slammed the door on his own child. So, I've changed the will. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone cursed under their breath. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Paul clenched his jaw. But I heard none of it. All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children, he said, and I am of you, of the woman you became, even when I wasn't looking. The video paused, the screen flickering for a breath, then brightened once more. Tell Lucas, thank you, for letting me be his grandfather, even if it was from a distance. The screen went black. Silence swallowed the room. Not a word. Not a breath. My father had never said those words to my face, but there they were, clear, undeniable. For the first time in a decade, I heard him. Just as the whispers started, confusion, outrage, denial, Mr. Denton opened his leather folder and adjusted his glasses like nothing had happened. The video, he said calmly, was for context. Now per Mr. Turner's revised and legally binding last will and testament, I will read the final allocations. Vanessa let out a sharp breath through her nose like she was strapping on armor. Paul crossed his arms and leaned back, smug again like nothing could touch him. To my daughter Monica Elaine Turner, Mr. Denton began, voice formal even, I leave the Turner family residence, all its contents, and the surrounding land in full. The air shifted again, heads turned, eyes burned into me. My hand was still frozen in Lucas's, his was tucked neatly inside mine, grounding me. In addition, Mr. Denton went on, I leave to Monica Turner the sum of $250,000 in liquid assets and the remainder of my retirement savings. I could barely process the words. And to her son Lucas Turner, I leave a college trust in the amount of $100,000. Lucas looked up at me, wide-eyed, lips slightly parted in shock. I didn't know what to say. I was still trying to believe it myself. Mr. Denton flipped to the final page. To my son, Paul, and to my daughter Vanessa, I leave the following: a collection of family photo albums, my military compass, and the Bible gifted to me by my mother when I turned 18. Someone gasped. Maybe one of the cousins. I didn't look. Vanessa jumped to her feet. What? No, there must be a mistake. There's no mistake, Denton said, utterly unfazed. Your father amended the will 2 years ago. It is witnessed, notarized, and filed with the county. Paul rose slowly, jaw flexing. He was unwell. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was of sound mind, Denton replied, calmly shutting the folder. And very deliberate. Then, he lifted a small piece of handwritten paper, cleared his throat, and read one final note. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered. Let them remember who stayed silent but kept loving anyway. This house belongs to the one who never asked for anything, and gave anyway. Vanessa spun and stormed from the room. her heels clicking like gunshots on hardwood. Paul followed, disbelief clinging to him like static. I didn't move. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt seen. I felt chosen. Vanessa's voice broke the momentary stillness, sharp and furious. "You had to have manipulated him," she shouted, her wine glass still dangling forgotten in her hand. "There's no way he'd change the will on his own. You did something." She stopped suddenly, the accusation choking itself in her throat when she saw I wasn't reacting. I didn't need to defend myself. The video had already spoken every word I never could. "You twisted him around somehow?" she snapped again, louder this time, cheeks flushed with rage. "You come back here after all the hell you caused and act like some tragic saint? You're unbelievable." Lucas flinched beside me. I rested my hand gently on his shoulder, not to shield him, but to steady myself. I was here. I was real. I wasn't falling apart this time. Paul stepped forward now, voice low and simmering. "We're going to contest this. There's no way it holds up." He wasn't thinking straight. Mr. Denton didn't even blink. "Your father made these changes 2 full years before his health declined," he said coolly. "He was mentally competent, and the documents are notarized, witnessed, and on file with the court. There is no legal ground to challenge it." Paul opened his mouth to argue again, but the look Denton gave him, measured, seasoned, unimpressed, stopped him cold. It was the kind of look that came from decades in courtrooms and zero tolerance for tantrums wrapped in entitlement. Around us, the room had shifted. Some cousins whispered to each other now, their earlier smirks vanished. A few quietly slipped toward the hallway, their coats in hand, avoiding my gaze like it burned. But it wasn't hate I saw anymore. It was something else. Something closer to guilt. Vanessa's hands trembled. She set her wine glass down too hard on the sideboard. "This is a joke," she muttered, voice cracking. "It's a sick joke." She turned and stormed out. No goodbye, no dignity, just exit. Paul followed seconds later, his face locked in a clenched silence. And just like that, they were gone. They had buried me a decade ago, but I had survived, and now they were the ones retreating. The room was finally quiet, not tense, not awkward, just still. I sat there, unmoving, Lucas at my side, his small hand still resting in mine, looser now, but present. Neither of us had let go. The voices faded down the hallway. Doors clicked shut. The sound of footsteps grew fainter. I slowly stood and walked to the far corner of the room. There, beneath the wide bay window, sat my father's old leather reading chair. It hadn't changed. Worn arms, creaky joints, sun-faded leather that had molded to his shape over the years. I paused in front of it, reached out, let my fingers brush the top of the backrest. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. "I forgive you." The words came easily. They didn't burn or twist in my throat. They landed gently like they'd been waiting all along. Behind me, Lucas didn't speak. He didn't have to. The fire crackled softly. A warm orange glow settled over everything. The photographs, the hardwood, the space where something old and heavy had finally lifted. I turned to take one last look at the house. For the first time in forever, it didn't feel like a place that had shut me out. It felt like a home that had finally exhaled. Maybe ghosts don't always leave. Maybe they wait. And I had finally said the words they were waiting for. Weeks passed. The house felt different now. Quiet, but not in that empty, aching way. This was the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Stillness. Peace. Not silence from suppression, but from healing. Lucas had claimed the sunroom. Every morning I'd find him there, legs crossed beneath the table, sketchbook in his lap, tongue tucked between his teeth as he shaded in birds he spotted from the back porch. Blue jays, cardinals, wrens. Each day a new one. Each one drawn with wonder. Sometimes I'd hear his laughter floating through the halls, soft and bright, filling places that used to echo with absence. Then one morning a letter came, plain white envelope. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately, Mr. Halverson's. I opened it slowly, hands calm for once. Inside was a single short note. "He cried, Monica, the day he realized it was you sending the money. I'd never seen your father look so small." He carried that truth quietly, all the way to the end. I folded the letter and stepped out onto the porch. Lucas was there on the top step, sketching a hawk with wings outstretched, completely focused, pencil gliding smoothly across the page. The sun was warm. The trees rustled softly, old oaks swaying like they were exhaling too. I looked out at the yard. The land my father had left behind, the place I once thought I'd never return to. He saw me in the end, I said aloud. Not to anyone, really. Just to the breeze, to the moment. Because it was true. The girl they'd erased hadn't disappeared. She had simply waited for the truth to come home.